Hello everybody, welcome to this video. Today I'm going to talk about language, how we create worlds from our words. And this topic is quite overlooked and quite underappreciated. So to emphasize how important it can be, I will quote the Bible. And the Bible states that in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Pretty powerful stuff here. Sometimes the term logos is used instead. In the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with God, and the logos was God. Now, one definition of logos is that it means word, reason, or plan. And plan is the key word here. Plan as in a map. So the logos is the original map for creation. But since it is the original, it's not the map, it's the territory itself. So the logos is the territory of creation or the projection of creation. In this video, I will talk about two different levels of reality. The first level is the logos, the projection, the territory, and God. The other level would be the sublogos, the reflection, the map of the territory, and the human. And I will unite these different levels using the lens of language. Now, description is creation. We give form to what we put into words. And we do this either consciously or unconsciously. We give the words power and energy by thinking and speaking. So we infuse the words with our life energy. Language is a carrier of energy and attention. We can say that our language is our infrastructure for our perception. So we can see the pathways where we can move our attention and our perception in our language. And our habits of how we use our language, that is what holds our world, our perception together. And this is for good and not for so good. It's good because it gives our world a kind of solidity, consistency, and predictability. And not so good for exactly the same reasons. It becomes very solid and very predictable, and we only experience, we only perceive within the boundaries of our description. And this is where silence comes in. Silence, as in meditation, is what suspends language. And when we move into deep silence, we suspend our language, we suspend our grip on the world, and we can start to perceive in other ways outside of the boundaries of our own language. But there are different degrees and levels of silence, because even though we have no superficial thought, our language is still imprinted within our subconscious. So our world is usually held together more or less by our subconscious, even though we are in quite deep meditation. Now, spiritual awakening is often awakening into a new and expanded description of one's world. So one's language can start to take new pathways, and one's perception can start to work in other ways as well. And when one tries to explain one's new experience, one's new perception to a person who is still living in a conventional description of their world, it can be very difficult to translate. It can be very difficult to explain, because this person can only perceive within the boundaries of their description. And anything outside their language, outside of their description, can be very, very difficult to understand. This also points out how important it is that we don't have a closed description of our world, a closed understanding of the world where we think we have all the answers. We should always have an open description that we can refine when we find better information, where we find better approximations of what's going on, because our description is an approximation only. It's a map of reality. It's not the territory itself. So we should always leave room for unknowing within our worldview, within our map of reality and our description of our reality. This is what it means to be open-minded, where we have an open interpretation of the world and an open description of the world, where we always have room for expansion. Now, when we speak about creation, people who are scientifically minded, people who like biology, they might think about genes. Genes from the word genesis. Genes are small hereditary units. And what we can say about them is that they are maps of creation. So depending on what kind of map one uses, it will be a different creation. So when we have cat genes, we will have a cat creation with cat behaviors. If we have human genes, we have a human creation with other behaviors. And it's the same thing when we talk about memes. So memes are a small unit of meaning or an idea. So these are also maps for creation. So depending on what kind of memes one is imprinted with, that will determine how their consciousness, how their world will appear. So here we can see two different languages to describe how reality works. We have the language of biology and genes, and we have the language of memes. Other languages could be mathematics, for example. And the more languages that we know, the better approximation we can have of how reality works. Because the approximation that we use, the map that we use, is how we can attune to the original logos, how we can align to the original projection. Now let's move on to culture as an expression of language. We see that within different cultures there will be different languages, and the larger the differences in culture, the larger the differences in language. Today, most of the world is more or less infused by Western culture, so we rarely see huge differences. But for the one who resonates with this topic, it can be very rewarding to read books from people in indigenous tribes who are not infused by Western culture, because they sometimes use language in a very different manner, in a different syntax. And this can expand one's description of one's world and expand one's consciousness as a result. So this can be very, very powerful. Now we will bring everything together. The better accuracy we have in our description, our map, the better we can attune ourselves to the original territory. And we'll use this figure here. We have two different levels within creation. So up here we have the projection, we have the logos and God. This is the territory, the original. Down here we have the reflection of the projection. We have the sub-logos of the logos. We have the human, the God incarnate. And the way this human reaches God is through a good map, a good description of the territory. Without a good description, without a good map, the human cannot find its way. So the better one can approximate the territory using language, the better one can attune to God. Now, when description attunes to the projection, the human can accurately reflect God, and the human becomes God, and God becomes human as an extension of itself. And this is unity. This unity is between human and God. It's between the self with a capital S and the small self, the incarnated self. It's unity between logos and sub-logos, unity between above and below, unity between the map and the territory, and unity between the crown and the root. One can also use different words to explain this, words that might be less dualistic. We can see this as our body, mind, being. So up here we have our crown chakra, our higher aspect. And down here we have our root chakra, our physical aspect. So what happens is that our physical aspect start to reflect and become an extension of our higher aspects, of our crown energy. So we move our crown all the way into our root. And our root reflects the crown. So our root moves all the way up into the crown. And both of these are in balance. And they becomes united into our heart chakra. So this is another way that we can perceive this human-God merge, the merge between our higher self and our smaller self. So that's another way that we can talk about it. The last thing that I want to do is that I want to invite everybody to take more responsibility of the way you use language. How do you talk to yourself? How do you talk to your neighbor, to your family? All of this is very important because the way you treat your word is the way you treat your world. They are both one and the same thing. Now, that was all I wanted to say about this topic today. Thank you very much for watching. Bye for now.